All right. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So, I guess we can, since this feast day is on Saturday, if anyone has any questions that they have, burning questions that they want to answer, then just ask me. But let's talk a little bit about Baba Kyrillos. Is like I said, his feast day is on Saturday, and he's such an influential character in the church. And even before he was a pope, but certainly after he became a pope. And he wasn't a pope very long, not nearly as long as like Pope Shenouda, for example. Maybe less than half of the amount of time that Pope Shenouda was a pope. But what was so influential about him was he brought the Coptic church sort of out of the Dark Ages. When he took over, the church was really in a bad place. Historically speaking, and if any of you have read the book Silent Patriarch, he kind of points out the good, the bad, and the ugly of the church, right? And there was just a lot of things that weren't going well in the church. And right off the bat, that concept, things not going well in the church, is not a foreign concept. Right? I mean, if you look at the history of Christianity, most of it can be marked by things not going well in the church, right? Whether it be the Coptic history or the Byzantine history or the Roman history, every church has its dark ages, right? And in fact, is the door locked? Is that why? Oh, no. She's got a very important text she has to deal with. I understand. And so each church deals with these dark ages. And the question is, why do churches have dark ages? They're going to come in any second. Hey guys, come on in. We're talking about Baba Kyrillos, since his feast day is on Saturday. And so when Baba Kyrillos took over, the darkness in the church was palpable. And the question is, why do churches have dark times? Anyone? Thoughts? Huh? Yeah, because people suck, right? And humans are in the church, and humans run the church, right? And we always believe that the work of the Holy Spirit guides the church over the long haul, but that doesn't mean in the short term bad things don't happen, right? Because any human can make any decision, and if they're in a position of power, then they're going to mess things up, right? And when we read about all kinds of scandals in the church, and sexual scandals, and financial scandals, and corruption scandals, and so when Pope Kyrillos took over, the church was really run on corruption, unfortunately, right? There's a lot of, people would buy priesthood, right? They buy a seat as a bishop, right? And you can't now. At this point in time, I would hope that you couldn't even imagine that anybody would want to buy that, like buy priesthood, right? So it must be the case. Why would you buy priesthood unless it was power, right? This was how you exerted influence over others. This is how you got your will done. This is how you fulfilled your ego, and people kissed your hand and worshiped the ground you walk on, and all of these things, right? And so this is a very sad time for the church. And the important lesson here is, if we're not careful, that these things can come back, right? We can allow ourselves to just kind of succumb to this focus on power and ritual and prestige and honor and money, right? And one of the interesting things about Pope Kyrillos was the way he came to power, if you will, right? He was this obscure monk that nobody knew, wasn't influential, and then the lottery fell on him. And the history books tell you that as soon as the lottery fell on him and he was picked, he was in a far away location, he burst into tears. So he knew by the Spirit that he'd been chosen as the patriarch. And he burst into tears, which is quite a juxtaposition from the priests who were buying, or people who were buying bishop ranks. This guy got the pope rank, he got the big job, right? And he burst into tears, right? It's an interesting response. Anyone here ever seen The Man of God, the story of Saint not Nicodemus, Nectarius? There's this great scene. So Saint Nectarius, you guys should watch that movie. It's amazing. It was in the movie theaters, actually, and it's very well professionally done. And one of the scenes, so he was supposed to be patriarch. He was actually the metropolitan of Alexandria in Egypt, actually, although he was Eastern Orthodox. And he was supposed to become patriarch of Greece, I think it was. And then the bishops there colluded against him. It just goes to show you, it makes you feel good to see this stuff, right? That the bishops, they voted for who should be patriarch and the Pope, and the bishops there didn't like him, so they rigged the vote, right, against him. And then he lost. And then his disciple was so upset that he lost. How you doing? Come on in. Wow, you're very wet. We should pull chairs or do something. I don't know what we should do, but anyway. So his disciple was very upset. And then he said something that I just absolutely love. He says, power turns you into the thing you least want to become. Power turns you into the thing you least want to become. Are you just going to come and distract everyone? Is that your objective? Okay. I'm just asking, because that's what you're doing. So I thought maybe that is his objective. All right, so anyway. No, you want to distract me too. Yeah, that's cute. So anyway, look at that. I'll say it again because we were all distracted. Power turns you into the thing you least want to become, right? So what this tells us is we should all avoid power as much as we possibly can, right? You don't want to ever be known as the guy or the woman, right? The person who does that great service or gives those great talks or does those great hymns or does those whatever, right? Or the person who serves. You don't want to be known at all, right? In fact, you want to kind of not be known, right? And if you had to pick one aspect of Pope Kyrillos' life that I think encapsulates him, it's that he was hidden, right? Not only was he hidden, his spiritual life was hidden, right? He had a hidden spiritual life. A few years back we had a retreat, and the little icon that we had was an iceberg. It was a Coptic Club retreat. And the reason I love that iceberg, thought is because that's where icebergs are, right? You only see the tip of the iceberg, right? This expression, right? But underneath the surface, most of the iceberg is gigantic, right? But you only see a piece of it, okay? And then, when you're in a ship and you drive by one of these icebergs, right? Well, the big part is underneath that you can't see, and that's the part that's going to crash your boat, right? So our spiritual life should be like an iceberg, right? That the only part that people see is just the part that pops out because all this stuff is underneath the water and it's floating as ice cubes tend to do, right? And it's pushing this one little piece out of the water. And almost by force, a part of the iceberg is exposed, only because it's pointy, right? But the rest of it wants to stay submerged, right? And that's the way we should be focused on in our spiritual life, right? And the question is, where do we get this from, right? Because right now I see very different things, right? Sometimes I hear things at church that kind of scare me, like church is a place where you're supposed to show your talents, a place to showcase your abilities. Huh? Right? Where did we get that from? Well, I think we kind of made it up. Right? Now, clearly, Christ says we're all given talents. And we're supposed to use those talents for the glory of God. That's a very different statement than show off your talents to everybody. And who do I show them off to? The world? Do I become the light of the world? If I'm a compassionate person, am I compassionate with people out there? No. Show them off to the church. Just our little group. We're going to get in a circle every Sunday, right? And we're all going to just be Coptic together, right? And then talk about how good we are to each other and show each other how good we are and show each other how humble we are and do the show. And then Monday through Saturday, we're off doing our thing, right? And Christianity isn't about Sunday. It's about Monday through Saturday. You don't come and showcase your talents to the church on a Sunday. That's like anathema to everything Christ did, right? And if you want to talk about the hidden life, look at Christ, right? There it is. That's the hidden life. No one knew who or what he was. Even his disciples didn't know who or what he was. They didn't even get it. He would do a miracle, and they still didn't know who or what he was. Even after resurrection, they really didn't get who or what he was. Right? It hit them very, very slowly. He wasn't showcasing his talents to people. It's just the opposite. Right? He was downplaying who he was. Right? And in fact, he who is God comes down and condescends and becomes a person. And I always like to use this example. If, Pope Tewedros came in right now, we'd all stand up and say, Kismara Ot, and go crazy, right? And, kiss his feet and everything else. And then if he went and sat on the floor, we'd be like, oh my gosh, Satan, I'm sitting on a chair. How could you sit on the floor? You're so humble. But Satan is what? Isn't he just a guy like me? Isn't he? Is he? He is, right? Christ isn't. Christ isn't just a guy. But Christ sat on the floor. And Christ was born in a manger, full of poop. It stunk. And no one cleaned it up before he walked in. Right? So this example of this hidden life comes from Christ himself. Right? And in fact, when we even think about the life of Christ, which aspect of his life was the most humiliating? Right? So if you think about the humiliation of Jesus, what aspect was the most humiliating? I think I've said this at St. John's, right? The aspect that was the most humiliating was his birth. It wasn't his crucifixion, right? Because from his birth, he went from way up here to down here. Crucifixion is just like, he's already a guy now, and I just, beat him and kill him. Pretty humiliating, right? But the real humiliation comes in this condescension, right? From heaven to earth, right? Coming down to our level. And this is something we refuse to do ourselves. This is something parents refuse to do with their kids. This is something servants refuse to do with their Sunday school kids. This is something clergy refuse to do with their parishioners. Come down to their level. Meet them where they're at. Yeah, I'm not at this level. I'm here. Meet me here. Right? And this is what we're all called to do, like Christ did, is meet people where they are. Okay? But the interesting thing about Christ is the most humiliating part of his ministry was the hidden part of his ministry. It's the part, you just see a baby being born and you have no idea, right? And it was such a humiliating, amazingly humble thing that the angels couldn't stay silent anymore, right? So angels are all over the place, right? And they're all just hidden. And all of a sudden, they're all exposed. You can see them. Like they came out of hiding and they couldn't stay quiet. And they said, glory to God in the highest, peace on earth, right? Goodwill towards men. They couldn't remain hidden any longer because of this act of humility, right? So this is who God is. God isn't humble. God is humility. He is the definition of humility. It's crazy humility. It's crazy humility, right? And so sometimes as people, we can put ourselves above other people, right? So one of the beautiful things about Pope Kyrillos is that he embodied this hiddenness. His spiritual life was hidden. His talents were hidden. His gifts were hidden. He tried to hide them. He didn't try to show up on a Sunday and say, hey, let me show as many people as I can how awesome I am. I play the piano. Let me do that in front of everyone and everyone can clap for me. That isn't Christianity. I mean, it's nice. It's show and tell. I mean, it's good for your self-esteem, I suppose, but it's not what Christ did. Right? So this hiddenness is what I hope we all take away from him, right? Is this idea that I don't want to be known. I don't want to be exposed. I don't want people to get what I'm doing or how I'm doing it. And you don't want to let too many people into your spiritual life for that reason. Right? You don't want to be explaining to people, yeah, I went this, I did this. And, like when I was in Africa last year, someone texted me at 2 o'clock in the morning, very upset. And he was like, hey, could you please tell the people in your Africa trip to stop posting pictures of themselves with African kids, right? So his contention, maybe legitimate, was people were kind of bragging a little, showing off. Hey, here's me holding a little African kid, right? It's me being awesome. Look at me doing service. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. Right? Everyone's, as quickly as they can, posting and telling everyone of everything they're doing. Now, some of it's sharing, and I understand that, right? But the point still stands, right? Keep some of it to yourself. Keep some of it hidden, right? And then once I get hidden, that's where the depth comes in, right? That's the part that I want, to go, right? I mean, it's kind of like a tree, right? I mean, you see like a tree and it's this big, right? But there's this root system underneath, and the roots are what are getting all the nutrients, right? That's where all of it's coming. That's where all the life is coming from. It's from those roots, right? So I encourage you to let your roots run deep, right? And I don't mean run deep as in do stuff and let everyone, no, run deep like it's me and God, right? It's I talk to him, right? And when he says, I am the tree of life, which is, what this icon is here, and this icon behind us of Christ, and there's a tree kind of in him, right? And he very clearly says, if you cut off a branch, it withers and dies, right? So we have to be just in rooted in him. He's the only thing we root ourselves in, right? And then Pope Kyrillos just embodied that, right? That hidden, mysterious life. Anybody have any questions? I can go on a little bit about him if you like, but that's the first point I wanted to make. All right, so I'll talk about this icon behind us, the one behind you guys. It's Saint Pope Kyrillos and his disciples, and each of the people there is actually a real person, and that's what they looked like in 1948 when Pope Kyrillos kind of was there, was discipling them. Some of them were lay people, some of them were priests. And if one of you guys can read the verse that's underneath the icon, maybe you have to step back and read the whole thing. Christian, can you read it to us?
As for us, let us disappear so that Christ might be manifest with his blessed glory.
With his what?
Blessed glory.
Okay, so as for us, let us disappear so that Christ might be manifest with his blessed glory. Right, so why do you think that verse is underneath that icon? By the way, every verse that's underneath every icon in this chapel has a meaning. And I'm sure you've wondered, why did we put that verse underneath that icon? One of the interesting things about Pope Kyrillos is, if you look at the history of each of those disciples, every single one of them is very different. So they're not a carbon copy of him. Because when you disciple someone, right, if you have a disciple, after a while they start talking like you, and they start acting like you, and they start doing the same things you do, because you're discipling them, right? One of the unique things about Pope Kyrillos is when he discipled people, he didn't make them into copies of himself. He actually made them into who they were meant to be. So he would find whatever gifts that they had, their talents, and each one was different, and he would pull out that gift, right? And so, again, it says, let us disappear so that what? Christ might be made manifest. Ah, there it is. So as a person, your job over your life is to disappear. That's our life. That's all we do. We disappear. And when I say we, I mean the old man, the old Adam, the ego, the self, the pride, the lust, the desires, all of the ugly. And the rest of our lives is spent chiseling away at all the ugly. And when I chisel away at all the ugly and I get rid of it slowly over years, I disappear, and people and what gets manifest, what gets seen, is him, Christ, right? That's the bogey. That's what we're trying to do in our life. And so one of the beautiful things about him is he brought out Christ in all of those disciples. He didn't make them a copy of him. He's not interested in making a copy of me. I want them to be an image of Christ, right? And so he disappeared and allowed that to happen, right? So, and the way he does that, right, is by being an extremely deep man of prayer, right? And this is kind of be the last point I want to focus on. Because sometimes we look at prayer as a chore. Worse, sometimes we look at it as, I don't want to get too controversial here, but sometimes we look at it as a ritual. Sometimes we look at it as a show of bravado, right? When someone says, hey man, you know how many hours we spent on Good Friday at my church? 11. Oh yeah? We did 12. I mean, what are you doing? What are you bragging about? Right? I mean, where in the Bible does it say that, where did Jesus say many words is the good thing? Right? They'll be known for their vain repetitions and 12 hours of prayer. And, so 1 hour I was listening to a documentary by Abuna Lazarus, Abuna Lazarus Antoni, the monk in Egypt. And he said something he's like, 1 hour of prayer standing before God with all your heart is worth a lifetime. It's like, that's everything. It's like, and you could just hear it in the way he said it. It's life altering. And I'm not saying I got to come to church and I got to stand there. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm saying you just really open yourself up in a dialogue with the divine, right? And you just get into a discussion at the deepest core of yourself, right? Because, with anyone else, you can BS, right? You can lie, you can be fake, you can, right? But when you're talking to God, and it's just you and God talking, it's very hard to make stuff up. It's very hard to say, well, my intention was good. And then you stop, you go, yeah, no, it wasn't. That's not why I did it. And then you're kind of like, I guess you know why I did it, don't you? Right? And now you're just very exposed. Okay? And when you get into that kind of dialogue with anybody, imagine, meeting Pope Kyrillos, right, who can see your thoughts and read people's minds, and people would walk in and make something up, and he'd just look at you, go, can you stop lying? And they go, oops, okay. So imagine just sitting with someone like that who's reading your thoughts. And that's a scary world, right? Because you don't want to lie to that guy. Now imagine when you're dialoguing with God, right? And you're totally exposed. And that's where the depth comes in, right? That's digging deep. It isn't a 12-hour Good Friday. Right? It's digging deep, right, into that conversation. Right? Now, I'm not saying, you shouldn't have a 12-hour Good Friday. If you'd like that, knock yourself out. But my point is, if you're going to do that, then pray. Maybe pray one of those hours would be wonderful, right? And really get into it, this dialogue with him, right? So how did Pope Kyrillos, St. Pope Kyrillos, achieve this depth? It was really, he was known as a man of prayer, right? And so many people love Pope Kyrillos because he did miracles. I'm like, I love him. Why? He did miracles. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, literally, right? That's nothing. In fact, a lot of times he would do a miracle and then he'd say, excuse me. He'd go in another room and he'd just burst into tears. Right? He would just start crying and he'd come back. His eyes were all red, puffy, swollen, because he'd just been crying because he just didn't want to be that guy. He didn't want to do miracles. He just wanted to live a life with God. He wanted to be what? Hidden. I can't imagine, but I can start to imagine, right? If you want to really be hidden, and then, you're walking by someone, and then, there's a kid with, who's crippled or whatever, and your scarf accidentally falls and hits the kid, and then the kid gets up, and you're like, and then all of a sudden it's like, you're a miracle worker, right? I'm like, my scarf fell, right? I didn't really work a miracle, right? And just the whole concept of you are a miracle worker, right? Which immediately does what? Take it away from God, right? Now the person's like, or maybe I even put my hand on him, and all of a sudden he's bad. I'm like, how do I, this doesn't heal anybody, right? Touching someone's head doesn't heal anybody, right? So clearly I'm not a miracle worker. There's no such thing as a human being a miracle worker, right? Clearly God did this, right? But I can imagine that if that happened to me, I'd be like, why? Well, now all these people are going to be like, oh, touch my kid, and you're great and you're holy and it's like, I'm a monkey, right? And if God's going to do these things, then you should be praising him, not me. And it would even be frustrating. Like, please, I can imagine saying, please don't do this to God. Please don't work miracles through my hands. Use someone else's hands, right? I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that guy, because everyone's going to be distracted with me, and they're not going to be interested in you. They're going to want the voodoo guy, right? The magic, the superstition, and come and do stuff for us. So Pope Kyrillos was like that, right? He didn't want the glory on him. He didn't want the praise on him, right? So as we enter our own spiritual lives, it's really important to stay grounded and to focus on the deep stuff. And the deep stuff is always hidden. That's not where anyone sees. That's not what anyone knows. And that's the real deal. And to be blatantly honest, right? Unfortunately, we do the opposite, right? Unfortunately, sometimes church becomes a place where people want to show off their talents and show off their gifts and, show I know things, or I'm knowledgeable, or I know this hymn, or I know this whatever, or I'm a really good speaker, or I'm a really good whatever. And that is the exact opposite of everything Christ taught us, right? Every gift, everything we have is a gift from God. Nothing is ours. There's nothing you can claim to be yours. I know I've told this story many times, but when they were painting this chapel, I would just watch, and it was the person who's painting the 21 Martyrs here. I would just watch him draw and just be amazed at how well he could draw, and he'd just start drawing faces. He'd look at a face, you can see each face is different there. He'd look at the face and he would just start doing it, And I always just would just glorify God because of him. I was like, wow, you gave this guy a real talent. This guy is, this gift. And I love icons, as many of you know, right? But I can't draw a stick figure to save my life, right? I can think of icons, I can design icons, I can appreciate icons. I know a good one from a bad one, but I can't draw, right? I can't draw a stick figure. It's a bad stick figure, right? And so then I compare myself to the person who wrote that icon. Is he better than I am? Because he can draw and I can't. Is he holier? Imagine if he thought he was. Imagine if he thought, I'm holy because I can draw and Archie can't, right? And obviously, he didn't work for that. He just can draw and I can't. That's a gift. He has a gift from God. It's not his gift. It's not his holiness. It's not him doing anything. It's a gift, isn't it? And imagine if he took pride in that gift and said, I'm better than others. I'm holier than others. I'm a better servant than others because I can draw. Right? And as silly as that sounds, that's what a lot of people do. Right? We have a talent, we have a gift, we have whatever, and we want to let everyone know, I'm pretty amazing. look at me. And it's like, look at you. You. Aren't you dust? Right? And just the indwelling of the Holy Spirit is in you, and each of us is given a different gift or different talent. Ooh, I heard that one over here. Right, so keep this intense focus on the depth, the quiet, the peaceful, the place where no one knows and no one goes, right? And that's the spiritual life that bears fruit, right? Some of you were at the YA retreat, and I kind of focused on this verse of the parable of the sower, right? And when the sower threw seeds on the rocks, it said, there's 4 soils, right? The rocks is one of them. It said that it sprung up more quickly because it had no root. It's very interesting, right? So the seeds on the rocky soil came up faster than the seeds on the good soil. The plants came up faster, which is a scary thought, right? So you throw something on with rocks, something shallow springs right up, pops up faster because it had no root. But the ones with roots take longer. They have to go deep, and they dig in, and then that plant comes up strong, right? Now, the problem with the one on the rock is it springs up faster, and everyone sees it, and it looks and goes, wow, look at me, I'm pretty amazing. And then it says the sun comes up, and the trials of the world come, and it scorches it, right? And so this is kind of the fear, is when, you have a 17-year-old who's leading the liturgy and, is the rock star and is unable to process his ego, right? And at some unfortunate way thinks, look at me. Look what I'm doing. Instead of, God gave me a gift of my voice, or I can make these sounds with my throat faster, and I can learn them faster than the kid next to me in hymn class. So I can make these throat sounds faster than he can make those throat sounds. Instead, he thinks, I'm leading. And then we see the same pattern over and over. The 20s come, 23, 24, 25. Where's the kid? Oh, he's gone. Why? He had no root. He sprung up too fast. There's no depth. There's no hidden life. It's all exposed. There's nothing hidden. Right? And then when the sun comes and the trials come, we break down. Anyway, I'll stop there. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? No one said a word. No one ever says a word when I give talks. It's really bad. Word to your moms. Came to drop bombs. I got more rhymes than the Bible's got psalms. No one knows this song? Yeah, it's old. Yes?
How do you disappear in a world that requires you to be so present without actually, becoming a monk or nun? Because not everyone is called to be a monk or nun. But how do you disappear in a world that requires you to be so, active?
When you say the world, you mean the church or the world?
The world, school, even church is kind of requires you to kind of...
So yeah, like you said, being a monk or nun is 1/10 of the population. So that's obviously not the mode that most people, a very, very, very small fraction of people take. No, the disappearance happens in the world, in plain sight, right? In fact, there are people in the church who you see and you have no idea what they are, right? And, many of the fathers say, when we get to heaven, the people we'll see in heaven are not the people we expected to see, and the people we expected to see won't be there. So sometimes we get fooled by wanting to be at the front row and the front and the front and the front, and make sure everyone knows us, and the bishop knows me, and everyone knows my name, and right? But that's not who ends up there, right? So what I would suggest is purposefully and aggressively remain as hidden as long as you can, right? Because, the spiritual life is about me and God. It's not about me and doing things, right? Every once in a while, someone will come to church and they haven't been in a long time, and they want to get back into it, whatever that means. And so then they're like, okay, what should I do? I want to do stuff. I want to come to St. Paul's and I want to do things. And I'm like, why do you got to do anything? Why can't you just be? It's just start being. Christianity isn't doing, right? The story of Mary and Martha, right? Mary just was being. She just sat there. I just need to listen. You have the words of eternal life. I don't got to do anything. Martha's running around making kach and tea, right? And petit four, which is petite four, by the way. It's a French word. I had no idea. And she's running around. And sometimes you go to church and there's just people running around, including me. And you just have to stop and say, am I just running around, going from thing to thing, meeting to meeting, stuff to stuff? Or am I just going to sit at the feet of Christ, right? And soak it in and then wait for him to call me to my service, right? And wait for it, Instead of saying, I really want to do this, or I really like this. Okay, wait for the calling. Sorry. Wrong throat, wrong pipe. So I guess that's how you stay hidden. I mean, St. Augustine has this great quote. He says, don't do anything so that people can see you. But then he continues and he says, but don't not do something because people can see you. Right? So don't say, well, I don't really want to do that because someone may notice I'm feeding the homeless, so I'll just stay home. No, you go feed the homeless. But don't go feed the homeless so that people can see you and then post about it, and tell the world. Big difference. And believe me, not that this matters, but everybody can tell, right? When something comes from the heart, and a servant is really, the love of Christ is underneath the surface, and it's just the tip that's showing, people can tell. I mean, one of the problems we have in America, there's so much disingenuous Christians out there preaching God to people. But a lot of it is, hate-based. A lot of it is ego-based. And I used to engage in this too, public confession, right? When I was in college, I'd go to, Protestant meetings and I'd debate Protestants, tell them they're wrong and I'm Orthodox and I'm the best. And I wanted to win. I wanted to win the argument. There's no God there. It's just me, my pride, and wanting to win an argument, right? Proving them wrong, right? And when I prove someone wrong, I feel good about myself. Yeah, maybe you're right. I'm like, yeah, maybe I am. I am, as if I'm orthodoxy, right? Or someone who's an atheist and you're trying to convince them that there is God, and then you get in these big debates, and everyone advertises and everyone's trying to out-intellectualize the other person. A lot of ego involved in that. And I'll throw science at you and I'll say a bunch of fancy words, and then you'll say fancy words and I'll say fancier words, and aha, I got you. And you're like, this is never the message of the gospel, right? The message of the gospel is you show love, right? And that's ultimately what works. Yeah.
So to answer that to the depth, I understand that we need to be hidden, but I feel like that's a lot. Like maybe we're trying on that path of hiddenness, but we're still struggling with the depth part. What was your
Say that question again.
The goal is the depth. We're trying to aim for that depth in that relationship with God. And I understand that requires hiddenness. And we're trying that, but hiddenness alone, maybe even in the hiddenness, Like you could struggle and still be shy.
Oh, sure, but I guess you're saying hiddenness isn't the objective, right? Then it's just like I'll go be a hermit and hide, right? But depth is the objective, correct, right? The thing about depth is always hidden, right? So you can be hidden and not deep, which is I think your point, and just be a recluse, right? Just some crazy guy grows a long beard and sits in his apartment and talks to the cat, right? I'm really hidden, okay, but I'm also nuts. Okay, but depth requires hiddenness, right? Whether depth is roots, an iceberg, whatever example you want, the deep part is a hidden part, right? So, yeah, don't go for hidden, but go for deep. And then you'll find that naturally deep lends itself to hidden. Yeah.
He talks a lot about silence, a lot and kind of meditative solitude. He was saying something like when you're aiming to become a more silent person and just be alone with God, in the beginning you won't feel a lot of the beauty of it until it becomes natural. You have to kind of push past the original barrier of finding joy in solitude, and once you get there, then you can recognize the depth and the beauty of like a private relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so what St. Isaac's saying is, there's a perseverance that needs to happen, right? So there's no magic formula, right? There's I'll be silent for half an hour and I'll see what happens, right? It's a way of life, and, every once in a while I'll be talking to someone and, I'll mention, that I'll drive in my car without anything on. And there's several people who just react very strongly to that. Like, you sit in the car and it's quiet. I'm like, yeah, in fact, I prefer that. Like, I don't like the radio. I don't like listening. I mean, I'll listen to anything. I'll listen to sermons. But mostly just quiet for hours. I'll just sit there quiet in the car. And I didn't think that was weird until everyone told me I'm weird, But that's not like I chose that because I really want that, and that's the right thing to do, and I want to follow that path, So it's, don't go for the outward appearances of these markers, right? And what St. Isaac the Syrian is saying is a path that one person takes, but it may not be your path, right? So don't, I guess what I'm saying is focus on what's the depth, right? And then let whatever happens. You know what I mean? If I could rephrase what he's saying is don't just focus on being silent. Like that's not it. It's focus on being silent, but be with him. You're silent and meditative, right? It's kind of like hidden. Don't focus on being hidden either. Be hidden and deep with him. Okay. Good. Any questions, comments, criticisms, complaints? No other questions? Yusuf, if you have nothing?
Nada.
It's too bad. I was really expecting more out of you, Yusuf.
I'm sorry.
I can't do that. All right. Glory be to God forever. Amen.